Welcome everybody to our workshop on proofreading and revisions. My name is Mark Maslar.
Hey guys, I'm Gabriella. So to start off, we would love to talk about when we're about to proofread a paper. And once you finish writing your long paper, we suggest that you probably take a break. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you should do during this break.
So when you're in the writing, you'll notice that you get very focused on what you're currently doing in the moment. You want to get it done. You want to just get it over with. But once you finish writing, this is the perfect time for you to be able to clear your mind and go back to understand whether or not you're actually hitting all the pieces of a rubric or the assignment that your teacher wants you to cover for a good grade. So make sure to give yourself the time needed in order to proofread your writing, so that way you can get the most out of your assignment.
So I got two types of revision. You have editing and then you have proofreading. In your editing stage, which we'll talk a bit more in detail, I'm just going to give you a broad explanation. You want to go through your paper and check for grammar mistakes, punctuation mistakes, and overall look at your organization. And with the proofreading, you want to dive in deeper. You want to really look at every sentence, every paragraph, the content, and make sure that your writing and your thoughts correlate together. And so just like Mark was saying, you want to have strategies, key strategies that you can use while you're editing your paper. And the first one we like to talk about is transition words. Transition words are great because they help us create fluidity, a fluid groove to our papers that help us sound more put together. And they could also give us a more academic tone to our papers that we're writing, whether that be essays, poems, or etc. So the first thing we want to cursor down is to signpost. Signpost is the idea that, teachers want to teach their students how to become natural comprehenders. And so there are 6 signposts that you can use while editing a paper to see if you've answered your 5 W's and your H. So just to go quickly over them, we would like to cursor down and look at the right side of our slideshow, and we have this picture of the 6 signposts. The first one is contrast and contradictions. And this answers why. Why is the character, or why is the paper saying what it's saying? And again, this is to remind us, just to give us some points on how to find the theme of the essay or the paper or the poem. And then, so you look at the contrast and the contradictions and you ask why. Why are they saying this? What's the correlation between these 2 points? Then you want to look at words of the wiser. So if you're reading a paper, you'd probably pay attention to any quotations that you might have and ask like why, what is the, so you want to look at the words of the wiser and ask yourself what are they talking about? And then you want to look at the aha moment. Look for any remarks or anything that guides you to understanding how is this impacting, or how is this proving a point. Then you want to look at the again and again, and this is answering another why. So why does this keep happening? Why do we keep getting references to this statement in our essay or poem or novel? And then you want to go over and look at the memory moment and ask yourself, why is this memory important? And then you have tough questions. What does this make me wonder about? And so all of this is going to help us to lead us into our conclusion, which is very important because we'll probably get references back to all these questions and answers to them. And so if we cursor down, we see that it says read your essay aloud. This is something I recommend to all our tutees. Please always read it out loud. It's so easy to kind of write a paper and never read it out loud, but I can assure you that if you read it out loud, you're going to be able to find awkward wording or find faults in the rhythm of your words, and you want to sound like you flow.
All right. So just going off of that last slide, it's always good to include another pair of eyes on our essay or any writing assignment. For example, sometimes when we read things out loud, we might think that it sounds completely normal to whoever's writing, but at the same time, maybe for someone else who will be reading, it might sound a little weird. So at that, don't be afraid to reach out to other people and to go through more of these strategies like the ones below. For example, in order to tighten the frame, you might say any of these questions to try and answer them according to your writing, which is, have you answered the question that you posed in the introduction? And usually this has to do with your thesis. Are you able to defend the thesis, or are your points in the body paragraphs making sense? Do they justify what you're saying? As well as, what is your motive? So what? Why are you writing this? And why should it be important to the reader? Now, for the next one, we have settle on a title, which at that, it's not always the most important thing of an essay, but it can be one that sets it apart. And this can be done if the title covers your thesis, which means it's the same topic or it relates to it, or it hints at what you are trying to do, your motive. And it always helps when it can hook or influence the reader to want to read it. If, for example, you just give like an analysis on understanding California and recent economic history, and then maybe a title could be checking out of the Hotel California. It might be connected with a song. It sounds very, catchy. And it can also lead into what you're talking about with how maybe things aren't doing well in California or different things like that based on what you plan to write about. So it's all about having fun with it too. And if you can do that, then you can also enjoy the process of editing and making it more worthwhile and something worth connecting with for your audience.
And so then you have your counter arguments. You always have to have two sides of the story. You have to be aware of this because you're going to have people who might agree with your thesis or might disagree. And so you want to sound as persuasive as possible to convince the other side that doesn't agree with you to maybe agree with you in certain points. You don't want to condescend, and you definitely want to show and not just tell. So that means you want to have good evidence. You want to have good quotations that support your thesis points. As we cursor down, we see surprising conclusions. A conclusion is essential for wrapping up your essay. And as you proofread and edit your conclusion, you want to make sure that you restate your thesis statements and tell the reader the motives of your essay, the so what. With all this information you've provided, so what? What is your concluding statement? You want to zoom out and talk about your topic and how it fits the larger things in life. So I like to refer to this as give your readers a modern day relevance to the issue you're talking about, whether that be Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet's play, or whether that be a film that was made 20 years ago. There's always something that you can find to give modern day relevance.
Right. So now another proofreading strategy is to use your computer to the best possible way. I mean, there are so many different resources online that you can rely on in order to help you in the process of proofreading. And an excellent example of that is Grammarly. Grammarly is one of the first resources that I go to, and it helps just to go through your essay and point out common mistakes. And that could be so many things, from grammar to formatting to passive versus active voice. And to think that instead of having to read through the whole entire essay, you could have the computer go through it for you. So that way you can get through all of these easy mistakes in the first 5-10 minutes after using Grammarly, and then you can move on to the bigger things. And that's what it's for.
Another thing you want to do is check the verbs. You want to make sure that you are placing them in correct tenses, as well as making sure that singular or plural are also being done accordingly to your sentence. So, for example, if you have a singular subject, you should have a singular verb. And as we can see, if we cursor down, we see the example of the cat plays with the yarn. So as you can see, the cat is singular and plays is in the verb tense of it being a subject that is singular. Whereas if we cursor down, we see that the cat's plays with the yarn is incorrect because the verb tense refers to a singular subject. And if we cursor down another time, we see that the cat play with the yarn is incorrect because the verb tense play is in the plural. It's referring to a plural subject. So just pay attention. Make sure that you use your microscopic eyes and go through each sentence and just make sure that your subject is in correct form with your verb tense.
All right. So with that, you have to understand how to use articles. The last slide that we were referencing is a rule called subject-verb agreement. And it's just making sure that everything is identified properly in your sentences with the use of plural or singular words. In terms of articles, this is a good representation of how you can go through your sentence and identify what article you should use for the different subjects you have in a sentence. For example, when you use jackets, you could say, I like the jackets in my closet, or you can use no article at all, and that's jackets keep people warm. So in either situation, you have to take into account how it's being used. Because then if you go into singular, you see the jacket in my room is plural. It's identifying something very specific. And so when you do that, you should always make sure to have that extra bit of information to understand what specific thing you're looking for. And the same thing can be applied for the use of a or an, which is, I like to carry a jacket with me to school. I saw an elephant at the zoo. These are all examples on how you need to have enough detail or make it vague enough for you to qualify the use of an article or not. The is always a definite article, which means that it's used for things that are specific, whether that is a certain amount of things or a certain kind of adjective that is paired with the subject in question. And the same thing goes with a or an, which are indefinite, which means that they can be used with things that aren't specific. And so that's what you should take into account, is whether or not you're trying to talk about something specific or not, whether there's a certain exact thing you're talking about, and is there only one thing of it, or there's more than one. And it doesn't matter how detailed it is.
And so continuing on talking about these strategies, we want to really focus on knowing your typing style. And so this kind of refers to, if you hold on to the shift key too long, you probably will just end up writing a lot of your sentences in capitalized form instead of not capitalized. So just make sure that, you you use your caps lock when needed, and that visually, aesthetically, your paper looks good. And if we cursor down, we see that the usual suspects. We want to pay attention to the usual suspects because, and so we also want to pay attention to the usual suspects. Look at old work. Where are the mistakes concentrated? Are these the same problems with your writing now? And just make sure that whatever mistakes you've had in the past, that you are aware of them, and that you focus as you read your new paper that you've written for these mistakes. Just double check to make sure that you're not recreating the same mistakes over and over again.
All right, for this last slide, we're going to be going over this example paper, and we're just going to annotate a few things on the slide in order to give you an understanding on what you can look for and what's our process of proofreading a paper. So we're going to go through it together. For example, I really like this title, like Bringing a Grin to Education, analysis on the movie A Smile as Big as the Moon. So that's always a good way to kind of get a catchy title into it. And even then, this person used 2 lines for their title, which is perfectly fine. You know, especially in a research paper, it's often seen that in academia you use 2. One for your specific paper itself, and then the second line to talk about like the subject that's going on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I read about titles is that you want to make sure that you are hinting to like the thesis statement. So what your claim is going to be about, the main topic, and yeah, just kind of introduce this idea through the title. And so talking about the thesis statement, let's take a look at our introduction paragraph. We see that it's kind of introducing this idea of a question here. How then can education become experience that leaves students smiling? And then introduces the motion picture and how that relates to that question. And now if we look at how they set up their thesis statements, we can find the thesis statement in the last sentence of the introduction paragraph. And sorry for my terrible scribbling on this paper. But let's just focus on this sentence, the thesis statement. It says, the movie illustrates many essential education concepts to making education meaningful and enjoyable, such as negative punishment, intrinsic motivation, attention, cultural tools, and moral reasoning. And so, like mentioned before, we see that the movie is being referred to in the thesis statement, the topic, and how we're going to talk about how it illustrates many essential education concepts to making education meaningful and enjoyable. And then it introduces each topic of each body paragraph, which would be our claims: negative punishment, intrinsic motivation, attention, cultural tools, and moral reasoning. And so let's pretend we didn't have time to read all of this. What we could have done is simply look at our thesis statement, and we would find out what each body paragraph is about, what the claim is, and kind of work our way through that.
Yeah, and with that, just reading through, there are small errors that you can find, no matter how professional your essay may seem. This is not to tear down anyone's writing, but it is recognizing that we're all human and that sometimes we make mistakes. And for example, you have in this topic sentence, this question, how was school? But the thing is that the overall sentence itself, when a student returns home and their parents ask them, how was school? You notice that it's as if they anticipated this next sentence. The usual reply is a sign of dissatisfaction or a degenerated shrug. So instead of starting a new sentence, you could rationalize making this question mark a comma and then connecting the 2 sentences so that it's one complete idea. And then just looking down, you see that I wrote this slash right here because when you have an introduction phrase or transition phrase in a sentence, you always follow that up with a comma. And then when you misbehave, you lose privileges. Notice that the period is on the inside of the quote, but since it is at the end of the sentence, you would have this period on the other side before as. So these are just small errors, and they can really sneak in there. So that's why a lot of these tools that we are providing you can help you get a complete perspective on how to understand your errors, your personal foibles or weaknesses, and how to correct them through the use of maybe a computer algorithm like Grammarly, or through different strategies like the ones we outlined earlier. So we hope that you can latch on to some of these ideas and start using them today.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Mark. And I think you say something very important. You're stating something very important, that no matter how many times you proofread or edit your paper, there's always going to be some mistake to it. We could always be improving. And, just take these tips and strategies that we've given you today through this workshop and really start to become aware. Write down a list of your most common mistakes or errors and work through them, and do a little bit of research. And we could also help you figure out what these mistakes are and explain what it is and how to fix it. That's why we're here.
All right. So with that,
To finalize, let's just take a look at the conclusion of the paper. And right now, we can see from this conclusion that it once again is restating the thesis statements, and that is very important to do in a conclusion. You want to remind the reader about the most important topics or arguments or claims that were made in the essay. And as we cursor down, we see that it also at the end, like we had already mentioned, in the concluding sentence, it makes a reference to a larger issue or modern day relevance. And like, let's just read it out loud so it makes more sense. It says, a smile as big as the moon, which is the film, demonstrates some of the means by which educators and parents can help students to really have a smile as big as the moon through their educational experience. And so this concluding sentence is kind of referring back to why this paper was written this last concluding sentence refers to why this paper was written. And it's to provide educators and teachers with tools and ideas on how to improve their techniques.
thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Gabriella. A lot of those tips are some things that I could definitely use in my essays. And there are some things like holding on to that shift button that really get me. And I always have to go back and proofread and edit to make sure that I can correct my mistakes. So I hope that for all of you out there, there are some things that you saw here that could help you in the future as you go out and write.
Thank you, Mark, also for your suggestions and recommendations. I know you are definitely a great tutor here at the Reading Writing Center with a lot of experience, and I encourage everybody to, try and book an appointment with him because he's great. Anyways, have a great day, everyone, and thank you. We're here to help you, and just remember, let us know how we can help you achieve your writing and reading goals.
All right. Take care.
Bye.